Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. Good afternoon and Assalamu Alaikum. We welcome our friends, or I should say good afternoon in this part of the United States, and good evening to our brothers and sisters in South Africa. We welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Policing in America. This is our topic for today. The origin of modern day policing can be traced back to the slave patrols in the Carolinas back in the 1700s, the early 1700s. They established a system of terror to, among other things, prevent and subdue uprisings, and to apprehend and return enslaved Africans to their quote-unquote plantation owners. We have a 7-minute video that we'd like to open the broadcast with that provides a historical capsule of policing in America. Let's see the video, Brother Sadiq.
Yeah, I know the police are broken. Let's just enact the reforms that will fix it. But the question for me is, if the police are broken, when did they break? What year in American history did the police break? It seems really trite to say if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. But nothing illustrates that more than the history of policing.
Policing, in one form or another, has existed since colonial days. In the form of night watches, local sheriffs, and militias. But it wasn't until the 19th century that northern cities such as Boston created modern police departments as we would recognize them today. These northern departments were not the first example of a uniformed, publicly funded law enforcement institution in America.
By the time the northern colonies were afoot in the 17th century, the idea of keeping track of the most valuable asset in the United States, that is, enslaved Africans, animated much of what we'd recognize today as law enforcement.
In the 1700s, the South saw the rise of official, salaried slave patrols, whose task was to capture, control, and brutalize enslaved people.
The initial acts that empower slave patrols and militias were acts that basically empowered all white people to surveil and punish all black people.
These slave patrols were required to serve a tour of duty, usually up to a year. Individuals were compensated for their time, but they were also penalized if they did not show up for their required service.
All white people, including white children, were expected to enforce so-called slave codes. These laws were meant to prevent enslaved people from organizing or rebelling. It was against the law, for example, for enslaved people to leave their plantations, gather without a white person present, learn to read or write, or even defend themselves if attacked by a white person. After the Civil War, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery except as a punishment for a crime.
The South immediately moves to exploit this loophole by passing a series of crime bills known as black codes, which essentially criminalize all forms of black freedom. They criminalize unemployment by adopting these very broad vagrancy laws that essentially criminalize any black person who can't prove that they're working. Any African American who challenges the terms of work, barters or brokers for a better deal, turns down a terrible offer, walks away from an abusive employer or a relationship with a landowner, by definition becomes a vagrant and by definition becomes a criminal. They could then be sold at sheriff's auction back to the very person who had just claimed that they were a criminal by virtue of not accepting a fair labor deal.
This practice of convict leasing earned enormous revenues for the states who lent out their prisoners, and huge profits for the companies using this prison labor in mining, railroads, and other industries. The new laws effectively re-enslaved those who had just gained their freedom and required new police to take over the former duties of the slave patrols.
When you have black people serving in political offices for the first time, when you have black landowners in abundance, when you have black professionals, there are Reconstruction era judges, the stakes are even higher for this everyday performance of black subservience to white domination. It is the police who will ultimately serve that function of reminding black people in many cases their lower status in society.
What we see is that that general way of thinking about race and thinking about disorderly people never really changes. It's kind of woven into the DNA. But it's not just because individual police officers are racist. It's because the institution was literally created to make sure that wealthy and powerful people could extract labor.
Early police departments in the North had a similar goal to control labor and were notoriously corrupt.
The police functioned as an expression of political elites and powerful, affluent people who essentially wanted poor people to stay in their segregated slum communities. Police often functioned as enforcers of political machines, functioned one step removed from gangs.
Police often worked in the service of business owners who were faced with growing unrest among their labor forces in the wake of mass European immigration and rapid industrialization.
One of the best examples of this is the Pennsylvania State Police. The institutions that precede the Pennsylvania State Police are actually private police forces which are owned by people who are running coal mines. And their job is explicitly to control the workers who are trying to unionize for rights.
The story of policing in the United States is the story of systems meant to protect and serve only a fraction of Americans. It is this history that many of today's activists point to when calling for the defunding or even the abolishment of police.
The cops not protecting us, we gotta protect us.
The ability to police crime or inequality or poverty or races or whatever was the social problem to be solved by law enforcement was always an act of political power and discretion. And it just so happens that African Americans have stood in that position for the longest of any other population.
What the history does is it allows us to decouple the idea of public safety from the idea of police. What actually protects women from rape and from sexual assault, right? What actually stops people in communities, both black and white, from killing each other? What kinds of things actually help people who are mentally ill? Are those things police? And I think very quickly, once you reflect on that, you realize the answer is no. We have to stop saying police are broken. We have to say police are working, and we need to create another institution to do public safety.
Yes, indeed. Now, for today's conversation, we have an excellent guest to help us navigate what will no doubt be a thought-provoking discussion. Before we bring him on, however, let's go to our first commercial break so that we can have some uninterrupted conversation. Let's go to a commercial break, Brother Saalakhan.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only 5 Rand a day, or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media, humanitarian journalism.
If you are just joining us, our topic for today is policing in America. And now for our guests. Ronald Hampton is a 24-year, now retired veteran of Washington, D.C.'s police force and one of the founding members of the National Black Police Association. He served as executive director of this organization for a good number of years. Today, he serves as convener of the Institute of Black World 21st Century Police Reform and Accountability Task Force. That is a mouthful. And without any further ado, let's welcome our brother to today's conversation. My brother. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, my brother. Good to see you. Thank you very much, man.
Oh, my pleasure, brother. What do you think about that piece of video we just saw, and what is your opening observation on the challenges we face as a nation in year 2025?
Well, the piece is fantastic, and is of course it's accurate. I've seen it a couple of times. I'm familiar with the history. While I was able to serve as a fellow at the University of the District of Columbia, we talked about policing in America. We talked about the oppressive nature of policing from the very beginning. Again, the piece is it's just valuable information because policing existed for Black folk long before uniform police was even developed in the cities of Boston and in New York. And it has always been oppressive for Black folk. And so, that's one of the reasons why in the last 10, 12 years, we've been talking about, a group of us have been talking about reimagining, because like the brother said, what you really need to do is separate it, that policing has nothing to do with public safety. Those are two very different things. Public safety includes the opinion and the sweat and participation of the public, the citizens, the residents of these communities. Policing has never ever acknowledged that. And that's why we're always working from the rear rather than a proactive strategy and one that involves the residents and people who live in our community. So the piece is very valuable. We really and truthfully, there needs to be a campaign to show that piece, to educate our community, because one of the things that happened in contemporary policing is that it has a public relations machine, and whether it's intended or not, it does. And it talks about that when people find themselves in trouble, in desperate need, in need of assistance, and all those kind of things, they want you to call the police. But the police, when they get there, they don't do anything to relieve or or handle that situation. And what we find ourselves doing is believing in a system that does not deliver what it says that it is going to deliver. So if that's the case, then we're left at the beck and call of the police. And the other side of it is that if cities had the investment in social services and the kind of things that we really need in our community, as well as developing the resources in the community, and at some later time, we can talk about a project that we did here in Washington, D.C. in the Highland community, where we actually went in and did some of the kind of things that we're talking about in terms of reimagining the whole idea of the criminal justice system and with the participation of people. But we had to go through a process of re-educating people because of that whole idea that they've become conditioned to do certain things because of the public relations machine that exists in our police department and our criminal justice system. You have to unlearn that part in order to start talking about what you can do for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we factor into this conversation early on some of your personal history, where you were born, where you were raised, what factored into your decision to join the police department, and what some of your experiences have been.
Well, I was born right here in Washington, D.C. in Southeast. I have 6 sisters and brothers. We moved around. My mother, I have a twin sister who's deceased. She was diagnosed with MS at a young age and lived till she was 55. But most of my sisters and brothers, we live here in the city and really was educated here. And I loved to play basketball when I was in school and played in the service. I was in the Air Force. I'm a Vietnam veteran and all of that. When I came home, I wasn't necessarily interested in joining the police department. As a matter of fact, before I left, I worked for the National Geographic Society, and I came back and claimed my job and worked there for a while. And then I had a friend of mine whose father was a coach at basketball coach at Fairmount Heights here in Prince George's County. And Danny convinced me to join the police department because he was a police officer. Mm-hmm. And to go to show you how stressful that experience was for Blacks, because that's what they was doing. They was recruiting Black veterans coming home from the war, because police departments primarily was made up of white men. And here in the District of Columbia, which did not have a residency requirement, you could be from the hills of Pennsylvania or West Virginia, which a lot of them were, and they were police officers here. They were police officers when I went on in 1970, white police officers that had never ever seen a Black person, never lived in a community with a Black person. About 19% of the police department was Black when I joined, and over 70% of the people who lived in Washington, D.C. was Black. The other interesting thing is that I went on in 1970. In 1969, they had in November of 1969, they desegregated the police department. In other words, prior to 1969, November 1969, Black and white officers couldn't work together. Black officers couldn't ride in cars. They were relegated to walking a footbeat. They did not. Even if cars were put down and didn't have a white boy in them, you still had to walk a footbeat. So the department itself, like society, was segregated. And the department, like society, there were issues of racism and discrimination, as well as those that were related to sexism, because women were not allowed to ride in cars. Women were not allowed to walk a footbeat. And so in 1972, this white woman from the West Coast sued her police department that enabled women to become because they actually had a position in police department called police women, and they were relegated to working in the women's bureau and in the police station doing those kind of jobs. They wore skirts, they didn't wear pants. And so those changes changed the police department in terms of its structure, but it did not change the attitude, because it was a white male dominated vocation. And I say vocation in the sense that the mandatory educational requirement to be a police officer was a high school diploma, and there were some that were here during the time that you didn't have to have it. All you had to do was just come down to the police station and say you wanted to be a policeman. That was the history of it as it relates to white people. We didn't really start talking about qualifications until they started recruiting for blacks, and then all of a sudden you had to be qualified to be a police officer. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not against education, but the way you learn to be a police officer is through the academy process, which again is very racist. The overtures of it is racist also. What they really need to do is have some sort of educational process that's associated with policing. And what I'm about to say doesn't mean that I support or think that it's any better, but police departments in Canada and the UK and other places also require college, but they send you to college and then you become a police officer. They actually have police colleges in those foreign countries that provide that foundation, no support for it. But they also call their police departments police service, because they realize that policing is a service, not a force. And so it gives it an altogether different picture and everything else. And they're having their challenges. I work with the sisters and brothers overseas and in Canada all the time. And recently they're having some struggles now in the UK as well as in Canada. So it isn't perfect, but it's way different than what we have in America. But America sticks its chest out as much as it can around the whole idea that they know what policing is and they know how to do it and all that kind of stuff, which is really not true.
Now, tell us about this task force, brother, that you are the convener of.
Well, the task force is an idea that Dr. Ron Daniels, who is the president and founder of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, came up with some years ago, and it was established out of this whole idea that as people like myself and others begin to talk about the idea of what policing was, the reality about what policing is versus what we think it is, and the kind of things that the brothers talked about in the piece, the establishment of it was to bring together activists like myself who worked in the institution, the criminal justice system, academia, citizens, and other folk who have been doing this work for a long time, but realizing that it hasn't worked. Reform hasn't worked. Policing has been in a reforming mode for probably a very long time. And it goes back to some white man named O.W. Wilson, who was supposedly a reformer. And ideally his objective was to professionalize policing. And that's one thing. What he was attempting to do was to bring standards and guidelines and all those kind of things. But that didn't mean that it was going to translate into what we in our community needed in this system. What did happen, though, is that those who benefited from policing continued to benefit from policing, like the white community, the powerful, and the power holders in our society. But as Dr. Daniels and all of the people begin to talk about, we begin to bring people together. The first time I think we met was at Harvard at the Institute, the Hamilton Houston Institute for I think it's called the Hamilton Institute for Justice and I can't remember, but I remember the lawyer Charles Ogletree was the director of it, and then we also worked with David, who worked there. And one of the things that we began to do was to bring people together to have this conversation. My brother, there's an old saying in our society that we use sometimes that when we think we are talking to people who are like-minded, we say we are preaching to the choir. What we found out is that isn't true. There are people who have drank the lemonade and they believe the rhetoric just like people in our community because they've been subject to the brainwashing, but they also get paid to do exactly what the institution wants them to do. And so our objective was to sit down and have this conversation. So over the years, it's about 30 or 35 of us that meet on a regular basis, and we talk about the system and talk about what it is that we would like to do and reforming it. I don't like to use that word because I will say all the time, and Dr. Daniel gets on me because reform does not work. We've been reforming for this. Let me give an example. What happened to Rodney King in 1992 is what happened to George Floyd some years ago, and George Floyd lost his life. Mm-hmm. Policing hasn't changed, and yet during that same period of time, supposedly we were reforming police. All we've really been doing is tinkling around the edges of the institution and system in a desire to convince people that we have changed something that we haven't changed. Mm-hmm. And so this thing that we've been working on is actually, and we got a chance to do it before COVID, in a community here in Washington, D.C., where we met with the community, started talking and educating them. We did some surveying of calls for service, for example, utilizing information and data from the Unified Communication Bureau. We also had meetings with people who lived in that community. We also did an assessment of what skills that people had in that community and brought people to the point of understanding that they could handle the situations that existed in their community by applying the resources that they had and expertise that they had themselves. Therefore, what we call reducing the footprint of the police in that community, and people were solving their own problem. Now, in the beginning, it was difficult because we had senior citizens to tell us, say, Mr. Hampton, you need to get out of here with that talk. We need to have the police in here. Yeah. And I respect that because she wasn't saying that because she really believed it. She was saying that because she'd been conditioned to believe that when there's a problem in her community, she called the police. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is that the police still didn't solve the problem when they got there. Mm-hmm. But by people who live in that community, working on those issues, working together on those issues, utilizing the resources in that community, as well as the resources that existed in the parallel community, like the National Association of Black Social Workers, we were able to work out an agreement where they gave us a certain amount of volunteer hours to come in and do counseling and other things because they cared about that community. And that was a tangible service that we could rely on from our Black organizations. It's a result of something that we, Dr. Daniels and others, have been able to be a part of establishing called the Black Family Summit. Those are the kind of things that we can do in our community to take care of the issues that plague us. If our political leaders and budgets aren't going to take care of it, we can take care of it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of political leaders and budgets and agendas, we have a president right now and a party in lockstep with this president who is doing everything he possibly can to excite and manipulate public sentiment around issues of security, around issues of policing, around issues of crime and punishment, and the danger that from his manipulative perspective, the country, generally speaking, with emphasis on certain African American led cities, are in. On this note, just before we get you to share your thoughts on this twisted agenda, there's another piece of video that I'd like for us to see, and this is a video of the Chicago mayor responding to Trump's manipulative call for takeovers of cities. Let's see that piece of video, Brother Saalakhan.
Let's bring into the conversation Democratic Mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, to respond to what you heard right there. Mayor Johnson, thanks for your time this morning. We appreciate it. I don't have to tell you about the generations-old problem of gun violence on the streets of Chicago. You are making some headway there just in the last couple of years. But what is your response to President Trump as he floats the idea of sending the National Guard into Chicago?
Well, good morning. First of all, a military occupation of the city of Chicago would not only be illegal, but unconstitutional and costly. The city of Chicago is not requesting that federal troops come and occupy our city. In fact, I have not heard any mayor across this country call for American troops to come and occupy our cities. Look, we're working hard every single day to drive violence down in the city of Chicago. Since I've been in office, there's been a precipitous decline in violent crime in every single category. Just this year alone, we have a 32% reduction in homicides, almost 40% reduction in shootings and shooting victims. Robberies are down nearly 35%. Carjackings are down nearly 50%. We're moving in the right direction because we're making critical investments. If this president was actually serious about driving violence down in the city of Chicago and American cities across this country, he would work with mayors to make sure that we have the necessary investments to continue to do the work that we have been doing.
Well, you've led me to my next question, Mr. Mayor, which is, if not for these troops coming into Chicago, what would a productive relationship with the Trump administration look like? If they were serious about fighting crime in the streets of Chicago, what could they offer you that would be helpful?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. First of all, he could start by restoring the over $800 million that was taken away from violence prevention efforts back in April. Look, when I first became mayor of the city of Chicago, I made multiple requests to the previous administration to invest in violence prevention. That request remains. But these are also requests that I know that are being made in Baltimore by Brandon Scott, who's doing an incredible job. Barbara Lee in Oakland, who's doing an amazing job. Karen Bass in Los Angeles. Many mayors across this country. Randall Woodfin in Birmingham, Alabama. You are seeing declines that we have not seen in a generation. In fact, just the month of April this year, 2025, it was the safest April since 1962. Our work is working. This president and the federal government has a responsibility to ensure that cities have the resources that they need in order to continue to drive violence down across this country.
Interesting. Yeah. Before I get you to respond to what Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago had to say, I want to share an interesting quote from a celebrity chef out of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
His name is Andreas. He said, wait a minute, where is it at? Okay, yes, this is what he said. Quote, Mr. President, I understand why you are confused. In all your time in D.C., you haven't eaten once outside the White House or your own hotel. I've lived here for 33 years. And it's a flat out lie that half the restaurants have closed because of safety.
That's right.
But restaurants will close because you have troops with guns and federal agents harassing people, making people afraid to go out. Subhanallah. End quote. That is what this celebrity chef had to say.
Yeah.
And it's a very relevant observation
It is.
to make.
It is.
What are your thoughts on what Mayor Johnson had to say? And
first of all, Mayor Johnson is right on. He's right on tap with what it is he's talking about, and that has been the case. I've lived in this city all my life. I remember back during the time right before I retired from the police department, Washington D.C. Was noticed for being the murder capital of the world. Mm-hmm. We were bringing in numbers in the 300 and 400 a year, and then all of a sudden, Tyrone Parker, the Alliance of Concerned Men, formerly incarcerated individuals, started doing grassroots community work, organizing in communities, working with young people, doing basic work with young people in terms of what was doing. And they wasn't doing it with the police now. They were not doing it with the police. They were doing it in the community, and they wasn't armed. And they played the key role in bringing the murder rate from down over 400 down to 88.
Indeed.
To 88. But they did not, because of the leadership in this city and in the police department did not recognize or even raise the issue of the partnership that Tyrone and them played that created that significant decrease. And what happened with that was that there are other organizations and other individuals like David Muhammad on the West Coast, Marcus Ellis here in DC, who have structured these formerly incarcerated organizations and individuals, and they're doing the grassroots community level work to create partnerships and work with young people in the community that have made all the difference in the world. And I'm talking about nationally. We've seen that decrease that Mayor Johnson is talking about manifest itself because of the work of those individuals and those organizations. And it's been phenomenal. And the police in some places have not been a part of it, because one of the things that the community, the young people are saying, they have to gain the trust and confidence on the individuals that's working there, and working with the police are not going to do it. There's even been some police leadership that has been opposed to it, but these guys have been out there in the community getting that work and getting it done. And that's the money, that's the resources that Mayor Johnson was talking about that he was requesting from the Biden administration. And they're definitely not going to get it from this fool, because he's going along with it because he want to persecute these democratically run cities, and particularly by African American people. This man dislikes African American people immensely, and always have. He's always had some serious issues with African American people, and it goes even further back than the Central Park 5, the comments that he made about that, and those kids were innocent and said what they said under pressure from the police to confess to something that they didn't do. The things that are going on, our country is moving in the right direction, but he's not paying attention to that. But he also has some other unethical ways that things that he wants out of this, because he doesn't want to leave office. And the way you don't leave office is to bring the army into a situation to force and oppress people under the disguise that you somehow never helping them with a situation that they've been working on and been successful themselves.
I agree. And it's not, from my humble perspective, it's not just about wanting to remain in office. And of course,
you're right.
He wants to do. It's also about distraction.
That's
the Jeffrey Epstein scandal which is huge. And you know, lately it's kind of been off the radar because all of this other stuff that he and his administration has been engaged in.
Yeah, you know, my brother, he's a criminal.
No question.
He's a criminal. He's a convicted felon. The first time ever in the history that probably not the history of the country that a convicted felon has been in the White House, because some of the ones in the past probably were. But white folk can do that. White folk can do that. If Obama had that same oh no, he would have never got there. And if he had got there, they would have ran him out. But no, this white man can do that and get away with it, and then bring all this havoc on our country because of what it is that he sees wrong, which is also again a farce. Yeah.
Now the National Guard have been federalized. They are federal policemen on the streets of a number of our cities.
Right.
In Washington, D.C. alone, the figure I saw the other day was that the National Guard deployment in Washington is at an estimated cost of $1 million a day.
That's right.
$1 million a day. Now, while crime in the nation's capital is also reportedly at a 30-year low. You know, how do you make sense of this?
You can. A reasonable person can. And that's what I think we had to be careful with. Yes, people want to be safe in their community, but there's some things, and look, I don't have to tell you, the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. is not perfect, and it's far from being perfect.
Right.
But there's some things it could do. Ever since COVID, at the end of COVID, police officers have been sitting in cars in our community and not doing anything. That they do that a couple of times a day, and all they do is sit there. They don't speak to people. They don't get out the car. They don't walk. They need to get out of the car. They need to walk around. My brother, you remember when I was a police officer, and if I had rolled in the car, most of the time I didn't, but if I had rolled in the car and set up in the car and didn't get out the car when I parked it, I would have had hell to pay, because how do you get to know your community? How do you meet people if all you're going to do is sit up in the car? It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I saw some figures the other day that about 72% of the people of the District of Columbia don't feel safe. Well, I mean, one of the things that you can do from the police department's perspective is get to know your community. But I want to tell people in Washington, D.C. that knowing the police and having the police aren't going to make you safe. That's just, there's no relation. We can go back to the film now. There's no relationship between that. So the kind of things that you can do that make you feel safe in your community, number one is getting to know who live in your community, by speaking to the people who live in your community, by going out doing things in the community. But if you're waiting for the police to make you feel safe, then you're going to be waiting a little bit of time, because that's just not what's happening. And then those communities where we live in those communities east of the river, the police aren't going to, the National Guard or the police aren't over there. I work over there every single day, and I haven't seen a member of the National Guard yet. Or some of the federal police. Now, ICE is probably running around over there because in those communities, we have Spanish-speaking individuals who live in those communities. And not that they're here.
that are being terrorized by these federal forces. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's right. But the fact of the matter is that if they're here, they're also in the process of trying to become documented. And that's what the process was, and that's the process that we ought to hold them to. But all of that stuff that the orange man and those people down there talking about, they need to take that stuff somewhere else. They really do.
Brother Ron, we're in the final 15 minutes of today's broadcast. We're going to take another commercial break. This will be the final commercial break, and then come back on the other side with some enlightening and action-oriented, inshallah ta'ala, conversation to cap off this very important topic we're dealing with today. Let's go to the commercial break, Brother Sadiq.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
As temperatures drop and winter grips the country, the less fortunate in South Africa are preparing for the harsh realities that this season brings. Africa Muslims Agency is distributing blankets, clothing, and other essentials to thousands across the country. Sponsor a winter pack for 320 Rand or a blanket for 160 Rand and spread warmth this winter. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Make a conscious choice, sip for change, and support Palestine Drinks Africa. With every can, you help end the genocide and stand in solidarity with Palestine. Choose between our original or sugar-free options, available in a case of 24. Every sip is a step towards justice. Every purchase, a powerful message of unity and support for the Palestinian cause. Contact 082-888-1440 or 082-7739-556 today and be part of the change. Palestine Drinks Africa. Sip for change. Liberty for everyone.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, you've missed about 45 minutes of a thought-provoking conversation, but inshallah ta'ala, you can catch it later on via the YouTube link or the Facebook link. My guest today, dealing with the topic of policing in America, has been Ronald Hampton, a friend of many years. I want to repeat in our final minutes, brother, that from my perspective, we have a tremendous waste of money, of taxpayer money, with the call out that has been made for National Guardsmen in a number of African American led cities. It's been a needless declaration, and just again in Washington D.C. alone, at a cost of $1 million a day. Now, I've been a little disappointed if the report is true, and I'd like for you to comment on this if you know. If the report is true that the mayor of Washington, kind of threw in the towel and expressed, a bit of welcome for the decision of Trump to do what he did in the nation's capital. But there's another issue here that I'd like for you to also to respond to in addition to that.
Yes, sir.
6 states, from what I saw, were the states that National Guardsmen were mobilized from. And these 6 states were Louisiana, Mississippi, Ohio, South Carolina, Tennessee, West Virginia. Yeah, and West Virginia. These were the 6 states. I don't know if others were added, but the majority of these states are hurricane-prone states. And we are now in hurricane season. In fact, this month marks the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina.
Correct.
And you would think that these National Guardsmen would not be taken from these states at a time like this. Again, at enormous cost. What are your thoughts, brother, on both of these issues?
Well, first of all, let me do the latter first, because I want to say something about our mayor. But the latter first is that this man in the White House has created an environment that allows his cronies, those individuals or states that you named are red states. And
right.
In those red states, consistently, for example, Mississippi has come in last in the poorest state, poorest school, a variety of poor things have happened to that state, and they always come up last. But he's able to get things from these red state governors because he has created an environment for them that allows them to be okay with hating and doing things against Black folk and Black leadership. And so this is something that he prides himself, and I'm talking about the orange man in the White House. He prides himself on the ability to do that. And parts of that is also that we have gotten no response and no guardrails created in the Congress when it comes to some of these issues. The very few guardrails that we have left in our society have been through the courts that have pushed back on some of his power grabbing procedures. And so it has allowed them to do the kind of things that they want to do, as well as express through their actions and behavior the dislike that they have for Black folk in the Black communities. And so that's just going to have to be a struggle that we deal with. But I think we have to continue to push back on it, like the mayors of Oakland and Chicago and Los Angeles and Baltimore doing. Those are the kind of things, Birmingham, that they're doing. They have to do that. Even there in Jackson, Mississippi, the brother is pushing back on it. But what has happened here in Washington, D.C. has really been interesting. Having come from that community in terms of serving as a police officer, you can take 20 police officers and put them in the 300 block of New Jersey Avenue, and ain't nothing going to happen down there for the length of time that there's 300 police officers. But that doesn't mean that that's a wise use of manpower to do that. But nothing is going to happen because I don't think we ought to underestimate the intelligence of people who commit crime. Some crime is done as a result of opportunity, but also some crime is done as a result of planning. But criminals aren't stupid, so they're not going to walk up and commit a crime right in front of 25 police officers or 25 National Guard people who are armed with guns or 25 federal officers who are armed. And so that's what's happening in this city. But somehow or another, for her to surrender and talk about that there's a good side to it, I just can't forgive her for that, because that suggests somehow or another that that's good. And it isn't good, because people are oppressed. The impact has been felt and going to continue to be felt in terms of people going out, in terms of people's movement in this city. People are fearful. The relationship between community and police is at an all-time low. It's low anyway, but now it's at an all-time low because what she has done is allowed the police to be a part of this effort and the kind of things that's going on. I intentionally went to a meeting at the 3rd District police station the other day because they have these citizen advisory councils. And I'm sitting in the meeting listening to the captain down there talk about what it is that the guard are doing. I was also on the call the other day with Council Member Robert White, and there was a very sharp woman on there who asked the captain from whatever district he was from a question, and the question was, my brother, that if police officers are out stopping people, and we know that the Metropolitan Police officers are working with these federal officers. The lady said, well, if the federal officer in the presence of the Metropolitan officer picks up an individual and who is being held on immigration charges, which are civilian charges, not criminal charges. Immigration violations are civil, not criminal. Right. Where do you know, does the police department know where they're holding the individual or where they're taking them and where they're holding them? The captain hesitated, and you should have seen the look on his face, my brother. Then he said, no, I don't know. We don't know. So what that means is it's a one-way relationship. It's not a two-way relationship, but a one-way relationship. And the one-way relationship is that the Metropolitan Police Department help them, but they don't help the police department in terms of maintaining the kind of confidence and trust that a department needs to be able to work in the community. That's not happening because that captain was really serious. They don't know where ICE and all of them are taking them, and they're not allowing individuals to contact their family, friends, or nobody to say where they're going and what they're doing. That is something wrong with that. And the police should not allow themselves to be used in that fashion. I know if I was still on the police department, they couldn't do that in front of me because I would just push back on it. And there's nothing wrong with pushing back on shit that's illegal.
Right. Absolutely. No matter who is engaged in the illegality.
That's exactly right. And especially if you're representing the law enforcement community and you're allowing illegal actions to take place, and you don't say nothing, there's something wrong with you if you don't do that.
Okay, my brother, we're in the final 2 minutes of the broadcast. What would you like to say to the community at large? We have an international platform, so this is being seen in parts of Africa and Europe and also here in the United States. What, especially in the U.S., would you like to convey as your final message and piece of advice to concerned citizens?
There's a couple of things that are happening, and we're having the September the 27th, there's going to be an event that Dr. Daniels and them are bringing together. Interested people and community people will be able to attend. It's either going to be at the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church or either at the House of Prayer for All People over off of 6th Street. And there will be information coming out about the location. But we're going to have not only the discussion, but we're going to be talking about the strategy to relieve and alleviate some of the stuff that's going on. We're talking about maybe even identifying a community here in Washington, D.C. to work with, similar to what we did before COVID, to educate and train people into be able to be their own to do some of their own public safety work, because we have 3 more years of this, man, and it's not going to get better. If anything, it's going to get worse. But we can take care of ourselves. To me, that's the savior in all of this stuff, is that we need to talk about it. We need to bring people together. We need those who are able to work with. Tyrone and them, Park and them are doing stuff right now and have been for the last year, working in communities, providing protection for our students who are going to school and getting out of school in the evening through an organization that the acronym is CREW, C-R-E-W. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but they're in the community. I work in the school myself and stay active in the community. Those are the kind of things that we need to be doing for ourselves, as well as constructing a strategy where we can provide safety and public safety for our communities ourselves. We cannot depend on them to protect us, and police are not in the business of public safety in this city.
Okay. I want to thank you, Brother Ronald Hampton, a committed, conscious and committed brother, a veteran of the Washington, D.C. police force, and now leading a very important task force for community empowerment around the issue of policing. Thank you for joining us, brother, and inshallah ta'ala, we will have you back again soon.
Thank you.
On this note, we're going to conclude as we normally do with a very important verse from the Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wa tawasaw bil haqq. Wa tawasaw bis sabr. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.